Welcome, everybody, to our controller mobility debate of 2026. We're very grateful to have two candidates with us, Kenneth Mejia and Zach Sokoloff. I do want to let everybody know that we did invite Isidore Hall, who expressed interest a few weeks ago and then never responded again, so we assumed he was out. We got an email earlier this afternoon saying he did want to attend. We actually rearranged our whole format for him, and then he never responded again with us confirming he could attend. So here we are. We're very excited to have Kenneth and Zach and looking forward to a great conversation. So, as usual, we'll give a little bit of context and history, both for the candidates and for the audience. Then we're going to go into candidate opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. We have 9 curated questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds per answer per question. We'll go into some audience Q&A. That link up top is where you can ask questions as well as vote on other people's questions. We'll ask the top questions, and then we'll do candidate closing statements, 2 minutes per candidate. So I apologize if you've been to one of these debates before and you've seen a lot of these stats, but not everyone has, so I'll go through them briefly. The way we live in LA is really expensive to our economy, and it's estimated that LA loses about $19 billion per year in lost productivity due to people being stuck in gridlock. Traffic is also very stressful. There was another study done, it's kind of sad, and actually on the busiest highways, on the worst traffic days, nighttime domestic violence goes up by 9% of people traveling those highways. So we're so stressed out, we take it out when we get home in really awful ways. It impacts our air. You smoke up to 4 cigarettes per day, equivalent, just by breathing. Of course, that includes our kids. We rank worst in the nation for year-round ozone emissions, fifth worst for particle pollution, and we have one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. As far as alternatives to the car, the average bus is very slow in Los Angeles, just under 11 miles per hour. That's about the same as someone biking or riding a scooter. And one of the most amazing stats to me when I started Streets for All in 2019 was 2/3 of all trips made in the city are less than 5 miles. To say it differently, 2/3 of all the cars you see every day would go away if someone did a 25-minute or less bike ride. Half are 3 miles or less. So a lot of opportunity for change. So when you add all this up, it's not a great picture. And that's why Streets for All exists. We want to change this. We want to give people transportation options. And the controller position is important, not necessarily because the controller has the power to put in a bike lane or a bus lane, but they have the power of audits and transparency and holding elected leaders accountable. And so that is really important to our work. I do want to put a fine point on sort of the lunacy of current day Los Angeles. For those of you who might be familiar with the story, this is Vista Del Mar in CD11. In 2015, a woman was killed trying to cross Vista Del Mar. The city paid out nearly $10 million in a wrongful death case. 2 years later, the city returned to the street for a road safety project under Councilmember Bonin, and they reconfigured the street. They took away one lane of traffic in each direction. They tightened lanes. They added bike lanes. They slowed things down to try to not repeat what happened to this woman in 2015. There was an outcry by people. A lot of them didn't even live in LA. And the Mayor Garcetti at the time, ordered the street restored to its original dangerous state. So that was in 2017. In 2021, a mother was killed trying to cross the street with her kid. Her kid was injured. That's another multi-million-dollar payout. In 2024, 2 teens were killed on this street, likely leading to another millions of dollars in payout. And just recently, on the same exact street, 2 cars crashed into each other. One careened off and hit someone walking on the beach path, likely leading to another settlement. So this is just one small example, one street in the city of LA that has cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, led to horrific loss of life, and we're not doing anything about it. It's still staying the way it is. So we need to change things around here. All right. With that, we're going to begin with candidate opening statements, and we're going to rotate between each candidate. So in this case, in alphabetical order, Kenneth will start, followed by Zach, and then we'll keep rotating throughout the questions. So Kenneth, whenever you're ready.
Hi everyone, Kenneth Mejia here. Thank you to Streets for All for having me. I'm the current city controller right now. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I was also the first certified public accountant and auditor to be our city's accountant and auditor. I actually, used to scoot and bike to work and take the bus, the 704 to get to work on the west side, and pretty much I still take my bike, electric bike out with Killa on the back of me, my corgi, but my nozzle on my back tire fell off, so I can't do it anymore. So if anyone knows how to repair it, let me know. But, I appreciate the work that Streets for All does because the conditions of our roads are just unacceptable. And since taking office, we have supported the efforts to make our streets better, our sidewalks better, our infrastructure better. We actually collected signatures for Measure HLA. We even, my campaign manager got hit while collecting signatures, and we endorse it as well. But with our time in office, we try to bring a lot of transparency and accountability about mobility and the related, issues such as liabilities. We create our liabilities claims dashboard where you could see how many liabilities that the city has faced, over $300 million related to, dangerous conditions and more because of our infrastructure. We also have our capital infrastructure dashboard where you could check out all the different types of projects the cities are working on. We also just released our performance metrics dashboard. So if you're curious about how many potholes we've completed, how many curb ramps, how many sidewalks were repaired, things like that. So that way you guys could have that information. And obviously, we are a watchdog on all your tax dollars because if all the tax dollars, we need them all. And if there's none for transportation or mobility, then it's going to be hard to get where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Sokoloff. It's an honor to be with Streets for All tonight. Thank you for inviting me, Michael and Josh, and the organization to participate in this candidate forum. I'm running for city controller to ensure that our tax dollars are spent making LA safe, prosperous, affordable, and inclusive. So much of that starts with our basic city services in our infrastructure that Streets for All has advocated for many years. LA faces a $1 billion budget deficit. We are failing to provide these basic city services and, quite honestly, have lost the public's trust to solve the big problems too. This stems from financial mismanagement of taxpayer resources and city dollars. Time and again, we hear on the campaign trail similar frustration from Angelenos. We're paying more and getting less. This campaign is about making government work for the people of LA. We are focused not only on producing reports, but delivering results. Angelenos want change across the board. They are tired of the grandstanding and want leaders who get stuff done. I come to this race as a former public school teacher. I taught Algebra 1 in Boyle Heights and Watts, and for the last decade, I have managed large economic development projects to invest in our cities and our states' hurting entertainment industry. I'm excited to share more about our vision for the Office of Controller and specifically as it relates to our city's infrastructure, streets and sidewalks and otherwise, and look forward to a really spirited conversation.
Thank you. Zach, I can tell you're not a professional politician because you came in under time. That's unheard of. All right, on to our first question, and I think it's me. So the controller's role. While it's an elected position, the controller's office is limited. The office cannot make or change laws, and it can also not set the city's budget or priorities. However, the office can do audits and provide information for electeds who want to make data-driven decisions. So the question is, and we're going to start with Zach, how do you view the role of the controller's office? And specific to the cause of safer streets and better land use and better infrastructure, what do you think the office can do to help? So Zach, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You mentioned quite a few of the elements of the role of controller. As the group likely knows, the controller is the city's chief auditor. And in my view, this contains four major responsibilities. First is determining whether our tax dollars are being spent the way that they were intended to be spent. Second is evaluating whether our tax dollars are producing the outcomes they were intended to produce. And to the extent the answer to number two is no, the controller needs to propose solutions to generate the desired outcomes. And the fourth piece, which I think is maybe the most important, is working collaboratively across City Hall to deliver real results. As you mentioned, Michael, the controller's role is neither executive nor legislative. It doesn't get to vote at City Council. It doesn't get to pass executive orders. But what it can do is provide data and information to allow decision makers to make better and informed choices around our city's infrastructure and the services and departments that we manage. And so specifically to the case of safer streets, Michael, I think we need to create a a return on a metric, a return on investment of lack of action, in my view. We need to quantify the way that our city is failing as a result of these proactive investments in dollars spent later that are greater than they would have been spent if you would have taken the initiative up front.
Thank you. Kenneth.
Thanks for the question. As city controller, uh, close to 90% of our office is accounting related. Only 10% is audit. So you only really have seven auditors for the entire city. And so for us, the way we've been using this role is we've been using our expertise and knowledge basically as accountants and looking into the information and providing you all with dashboards, with reports on where money's being spent. Um, as mentioned, we can advocate. We do that a lot. We're actually one of the few who really point out where the city's money is going. We point out how during the last set of budget cuts, a lot of the infrastructure, public works departments, transportation, they were the ones who were getting hit. And essentially, what that leads to is these massive liability claims. So we've been advocating for better infrastructure, better streets, better roads, and you do that as the controller. And we give that data, like I said, with those dashboards that we've done. And a lot of our elected officials are actually using those dashboards. When we talk about the metrics where people want to know, how many curb ramps did we build? How many sidewalks or potholes did we fix? We have that data and we could show it based on how much, has been spent or not. But unfortunately, the city is not really great with the controller as a watchdog, and that has led to budget cuts and charter reforms. But we're doing our job as controller to continue providing that transparency and accountability no matter what.
Thank you. Josh, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. So this question is about the consultant economy. Over the last few decades, we have hollowed out many government services in-house and in the city, and we now rely on consultants for almost anything. In transportation, LADOT's first step in a road safety project isn't construction. It's to go through the process to bring a consultant on board who then manages outreach. The consultant fees add up to millions and add another layer on top of a bureaucratic city process. What do you think about us outsourcing more and more compared to doing things in-house? How much do you think the city could save per year if we stopped doing this?
I
And we're going to
think
start with you, Kenneth.
Yeah, great question. I mean, our office is a great example of that because of the budget cuts to our office. We truly value the in-house work that we do. I mean, like I said, a lot of the work that we do, the transparency and accountability, the dashboards, it's not our civil service who've been in the controller's office for a long time. It's actually us doing that work. So we know how much money we could save. We actually get a lot of people who ask, how much did you pay for this dashboard that you just made? And the answer is we didn't pay anything. Like this is just part of our, job where we're dishing out technology and transparency like in real time every week or two. But that's the issue that we're facing citywide. We spend a lot on contractors, and that is actually leading up to our one of our next audits that we'll be doing is seeing if we're getting the money that we're putting into these outside contractors and seeing if, could we do this in-house, right? And so I think that is an area that the city, that we focused on where we meet with our departments every month. And even with elected officials, we need to invest more in our workforce. And, these expensive consultants, there definitely needs to be more scrutiny. And that's what we're doing. But like I said, when you get into the controller's office, you realize how much they kneecap you with the budget cuts, the fact that you only have seven auditors for 40 departments and more. But we're here doing that work on our own because we know it's important. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks. Over to you, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Look, it's clear that the city couldn't manage its way out of a paper bag, And the consultant industrial complex is one of the leading culprits in projects that are over budget and behind schedule. I mean, I think you have to look no further than the recent example of the convention center to understand exactly how this plays out. The project, including all soft costs, is over $3 billion by my calculation, and the city council approved a $54 million outlay to pre-development costs, which is a fancy name for consultants. And the truth of the matter is it's difficult enough to deliver successful projects in the city of LA, but when you have a lack of coordination and really a lack of accountability, I think that's really the crux of the issue with consultants is that they obfuscate responsibility and nobody ultimately owns a project. And so when you have a project with delays, the person or the people who bear the cost of that is the taxpayer. I mean, I think you could name this feature, how government loses money without anyone stealing it. And I think you would argue whether the consultants are stealing it. And so I think an audit around how much money we're spending in-house versus how much money we're spending out of house. Again, I'll go back to this question of the cost of delay, the cost of lack of coordination, I think is critical to understanding how the consultant industrial complex is really handicapping the city's ability to deliver projects on time and on budget.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
So according to the City of LA Liability Claims Dashboard, the city has paid out nearly $300 million over the last 5 years due to traffic crashes and broken streets and sidewalks. In the one egregious example that I just gave on Vista Del Mar, we've paid out over $10 million without actually fixing the problem. So the question is, why do you think that the city seemingly just accepts such large liability payout numbers and continues to do very little to limit future liability payouts? And how do you suggest our elected leaders fix this? We'll start with Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Look, I think that liability payouts are a lagging indicator of a lack of investment. When the city fails to invest in streets and sidewalks, we are left with trip and fall lawsuits. And the less we invest proactively in our basic city services, we know that liability payouts are only going to continue to grow. And so right now, liability payouts are budgeted through a general liability reserve, which comes out of the general fund, as well as through broad, risk management accounts. And departments are not really held accountable for these large settlements. And so I would, as controller, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I would audit how the city budgets liability payouts. It's not enough to simply identify that there will be liability payouts, but how can we work? How can we provide the CAO, the city attorney's office, and others with information to manage this ballooning line item? We need to propose solutions to this. And ultimately, if we proactively take the steps to invest in the areas that are generating these lawsuits, we will reduce those lawsuits over time.
Thank you. Kenneth?
Great question. I mean, our office is known for being the liability claims watchdog, and that number you got from our dashboard, that's just never been seen before in this city, just making this information transparent. And once you put sunlight on something, you would be surprised on how much pressure that puts on elected officials. And because we've been sounding the alarm on liability claims all the time, we actually were able to get the city council and the mayor to actually budget liabilities more honestly. If you don't know, the city would always budget 87 million, 87 million. And then we were seeing that it was like 200 million, 160, 270. And this fiscal year, because of that pressure, they actually budgeted more honestly for that. So that way it's not disruptive when the city goes over that budget. And in addition, that information that it's out there, that's given to you all, so that way you all could put pressure as well for the city to lobby them and make them invest in street lights, better roads, better sidewalks, better infrastructure. And not only are we providing that transparency too, but we're also in the middle of an audit on this, what City Hall's doing for these liability claims. And we know that a big chunk of it is police, but we also know a big chunk of it is related to infrastructure, public related liabilities. And so we're auditing that actually right now to uncover just how effective the city is in reducing harm and these risks, and ultimately these financial setbacks that's put us in the hole.
Thank you. Over to you, Josh.
Great, thank you. All right, this next question is about our one of our favorite offices in the city, the CAO. It's one of the least known roles in the city, and it stands for the Chief Administrative Officer. This person, appointed by the mayor, is largely responsible for moving money around the city, setting budgets, and even quietly setting the city's priorities and policies on how money can be spent. How do you view the office of the CAO versus the controller's office? What changes do you think are needed in the charter or otherwise to better clarify the roles and the responsibilities of the two? And we're going to start with you, Kenneth.
Great question. The CAO is actually one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful official in the city. And no one knows that, as you said. It's an unelected appointed position that mainly reports to the mayor and then second the city council. I see that because they are supposed to be viewed as a neutral body. But as you've seen when they presented on HLA and they talked about how expensive it will be and that we're going to be on the hook. And now that HLA passed and all hell hasn't broken loose, as what was mentioned, you realize that this role that's seen as a neutral role is actually just doing the bidding of other elected officials. And so, I view them as a top financial official without any financial experience or qualifications. And that's sort of where you see all this fighting between our office and theirs, because you're seeing the city head in this direction where we're in this third budget deficit 3 years in a row right now, and you're not really seeing any changes, and they're supposed to be the financial advisor. And so that's why I believe that the changes that need to be made is there needs to be a chief financial officer. And right now there's a battle between us and the CAO. We believe we could do it because we have CPAs in our office. I'm a CPA. We're actually the ones who forecasted that revenues would be low. We're the ones who forecasted it that the expenditures would be high. And we gave the mayor and the council that information so that way they could budget better. And because of that, we're actually helping now with the city's budget process this fiscal year. And so, we're right and we want to continue that. But that's the difference between us.
Thank you. Over to you, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And I'm seeing these graphics behind the question. They're pretty cool. I think you're the creative mastermind behind them. But look, I think that the CAO and the controller need to be among the closest relationships that City Hall has. I think that this is a difference of approach that I have to the incumbent, but I would take steps to proactively develop a strong relationship with the CAO and work collaboratively. As you mentioned, Josh, the CAO builds the city budget, it negotiates labor contracts, it analyzes the financial impact of policy decisions. And these are exactly the functions of government in which the controller should be involved. And to the extent that the controller is boxed out of the CAO's process, I think that the controller has neutered the office itself. Now, look, I think it's very important to emphasize, in my view, the definition of partnership in the context of this question. Being a good partner is being honest with each other and speaking hard truths. Partnership does not mean acquiescence or deferring. But in my view, partnership is not weakness. Rather, it's the only way that the city is going to solve its biggest problems, which simply cannot be tackled with folks going it alone.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Okay. So right now the city is going through a process to create a ballot measure to revise our charter. This is the first time we've done so in about 25 years. Specific to transportation and infrastructure, Streets for All has put together a charter reform platform that consists of 4 asks. Number 1, give LADOT ownership of our paving and sidewalks, property line to property line. Number 2, have a dedicated funding source in the budget as a percentage of property tax revenues, similar to parks and libraries, for streets and sidewalks. Number 3, changing the city to a 2-year budget cycle and 5-year capital improvement plan. And number 4, either replacing the Board of Public Works with a director position or hiring a director position that reports to the mayor instead of the Board of Public Works, similar to other departments. So, how do you think the charter needs to change to improve our transportation infrastructure goals and maybe just larger goals as a city to stay fiscally solvent? I'll give it to Zach first.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I know that this is a very public and important ongoing debate. Look, I think charter reform is critical, but it's not the silver bullet. in my opinion. It's clear that there are structural changes that need to be made to how our city government works. Our charter just celebrated its 100th birthday, and the Los Angeles of today is clearly very different from the LA of the Roaring 20s. But there are a few specific examples, some of which you mentioned, that I think are long overdue. Look, I think there are obvious examples. A multi-year capital improvement plan. It's kind of incredulous to me to think that we don't have that as a city. Any successful business or organization that plans capital improvement in the future, that's just kind of commonplace. And the fact that the city doesn't do that today is kind of hard to believe. And then there are examples of the silos that you mentioned that I think stymie effective management and service delivery. I think that the DOT, Bureau of Street Services split, is a really good example of that. The fact that DOT looks after streets and street services is looking after sidewalks just doesn't really make a lot of common intuitive sense. But look, there are examples where I think the incumbent and I do disagree. I am in support of creating an office of a public advocate. There are many cities that have this office that fields residents' complaints and that forestalls the need to go to overburdened council offices, which often are unresponsive.
Thank you. Kenneth?
Thank you. For charter reform, we're definitely in supportive of, an independent budget dedicated just for public works and infrastructure. We're actually asking for that for our office too, as an independent oversight watchdog body. In addition, many of the things since we got into office, like a 2-year budget, performance-based budgeting, a capital infrastructure plan, because of our constant pushing for that, the city is actually in the process of moving towards that. And so we're actually very happy that a lot of our work, even though it's resisted, right, because of our adversarial nature as a watchdog, you'll notice that the city is actually coming around to a lot of the things we've been pushing as controller because we bring that background from the outside world to get the city back on more of a common sense platform. And so we're supportive of those charter reform changes. As the city controller, we're also fighting for making this office more, giving the power that it needs to do the job effectively, whether it's an independent budget, making it as the CFO, because right now the city's finances, as overseen by the CAO, is not cutting it. So those are the things that we're fighting for. And luckily, 5 out of the 6 that we wanted actually moved through. There's still one getting pushed. And I also want to clarify too that we're also for a public advocate, just not in the context of what was presented last week, in which the public advocate would take away our fraud, waste, and abuse function. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, over to you.
Thanks. All right, our favorite topic, the city budget. In recent years, the city budget has been decimated by slower tax revenues, raises to the LAPD, LAFD, and civil servants without a plan to pay for them, and ever-increasing lawsuit settlements and overspending by the city, the attorney, and LAPD. As a result, budget allocations to departments like LADOT, Streets LA, and the Bureau of Engineering, which are the departments that maintain our streets and repave them and are essential to the core activities that Streets for All cares about, have been cut to the bone. Today, if you report a broken sidewalk, it will take about 10 years to get that fixed. A broken street light is currently estimated to take 2 years to fix. A pothole can take over a year, and a speed hump request can take multiple years. Our pavement condition index is at 60% and expected to decrease 4% next fiscal year to 46. At this rate, we will pay out more in lawsuit settlements to people hurt on our streets and sidewalks than we spend fixing them. If you could wave a wand, what would be your concrete suggestions to city leadership to fix the city budget and be on a more sustainable path?
And just to clarify, it's 60 to 56, not 46. So 4% decrease is projected.
Did I say that wrong? Thanks, Michael.
Just clarify.
Great. We're going to start with you, Kenneth.
City budget, that is my specialty. The past 3 fiscal years have, the city's financial crisis could have been preventable. And once we took office, we were the ones who actually, like I mentioned, gave the mayor, the city council, and the CEO our forecasts for revenues and expenditures. And we hinted at them that these large increases, whether they're liability claims or these large salary increases, we made it known that the revenues weren't there. And so at the end of the day, what you're left with is this budget where we're balancing the backs of city employees through furloughs, layoffs, and through just to balance this budget. And that's not right. And we've been sounding the alarm on that, whether it's through our infographics, our dashboards, our reports. But the good news is even though we've been doing all this work on letting you all know and informing you all, counts the some of the budget and finance committee members and even the mayor are actually working with us for this budget process. And so, like I said before, even though we're seen as like the watchdog and we're known as like, being loud and getting viral and all that, it's actually working because they're bringing us in now for this budget process. And, it takes time. We have a long-term vision to fiscal health, and that's sort of what we've been trying to push since we've been in office. That includes having a CFO, multi-year budget, performance-based budgeting, a capital infrastructure plan, and many more just to include.
Great. Thank you. Over to you, Zach.
Awesome. Yeah, look, this is obviously at the heart of what the controller's office does. And again, I'll just be real. It doesn't take a CPA to know that we have a structural budget deficit. The hard part of the job of controller is building relationships to drive long-term change, both to the budget process as well as the budget outcomes. And I, appreciate what the incumbent is doing in his efforts to, push charter reform measures, but there is substantial power that the controller has within the ambit of the office today that I think has been dramatically underutilized. And so I'll give a specific example of a concrete suggestion. I wish that the city would be more proactive in investing in services rather than reactive. And I think one example that is very near and dear to the heart of Streets for All is the cost of repairing a street over time. If you have to slurry seal a street, it costs $30,000 per mile. If you have to resurface a street, it costs $200,000 per mile. And if you have to fully repair a street, it costs over $1 million per mile. And so this is exactly what I'm talking about, where delay costs taxpayers money. And so, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected into the controller's position, I would work, day and night on behalf of our taxpayers to partner with city officials and to face hard truths that ultimately may cause some short-term pain, but will have long-term gain.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, so the city controller is a role designed to act as the city watchdog, auditing programs and departments. In recent years, the mayor, council, and a city attorney have pushed back on the access and reporting necessary to successful auditing. This can result in less accountability and worse resource allocation. So, in your view, what is the ideal role of the controller, and what can we do to empower the controller to better hold other branches of the city government accountable? Let's start with Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And look, there is clearly a natural tension that exists between the mayor and the controller. I'm endorsed by two former controllers, one of whom, Laura Chick, was very well known for being a combative antagonist to the mayor during her tenure. But that did not prevent her from achieving, wins on behalf of the taxpayers during her time in office. And so, in my view, accountability, holding your elected officials accountable, does not need to mean acrimony. And honestly, in fact, I think that the mayor would understand a controller is doing its job when it identifies areas of inefficiency or room for improvement, if the controller is approaching those responsibilities from the perspective of working together to solve problems. And so, again, it's a fine line between accountability and oversight and collaboration and partnership. And I think that is something that I would bring to the office of controller.
Thank you. Kenneth?
Thanks. The sad reality when you're in City Hall is no matter who's the controller, and I've asked my staff who've been in the controller for 30 years, 40 years, and no matter how much you capitulate or try to work with other electeds, they're always going to see you as a watchdog, and no matter what you touch, it's going to be, seen as a threat. And that's why I feel that our approach that we that we've been in as the controller, especially going into our third year right now, like I said, we're seeing city council members, we're seeing the mayor actually come around and talk to us and meet with us because we've been right since the beginning. And that's the hard truth that needs to be said in this role as a city's watchdog. You have to remember we're not here to report to the mayor and city council. We're here to report to the people. And because of that pressure, we've been able to build this work, which we'll see hopefully with long-lasting change. But to empower us, we need charter reform. We need to be able to be the city's financial chief financial officer. We need to be able to have an independent budget, and we need to be able to have our performance audit powers clarified because that was actually one of the things that was passed last time, but we have elected officials who disagree with it. That's why we can't touch nearly $500 million every year in funds that are underneath an elected official, which is absurd. And so, that's sort of what we need to do to help us out. And, that's what we're going to keep doing.
Thank you. Josh, over to you.
Thanks. All right. This is a question about auditing and accountability. Audits offer transparency, but agencies need to be held accountable when funds are misused or underutilized. For example, an audit found that LAPD's use of helicopters is both extremely costly to taxpayers and does little to reduce crime. And yet, LAPD continues to use them and receive more money for them in their budget this year. How do we ensure that audit findings link to better outcomes? And we're going to start with you, Kenneth.
That's a great question. And, one of the sad realities, because everyone thinks the controller is just, the audits. But if you think about it, 7 people for a city of 4 million, over 40 departments, over 50,000 employees, it's just unattainable to audit everything. And so for us, we really picked our audits in a way that were responding to community um, feedback. That helicopter audit that we did was actually because of community feedback, because people see there's 2 helicopters in the sky every day, and we wanted to know, well, what are we accomplishing? How much does it cost? And that's how we were able to find out that it was $3,000 per flight hour. That we found out that it wasn't even being used on high priority situations. And so that's how we picked our audits. We also did homelessness audits, housing audits, animal shelters, liability claims, which we're in right now, things that the community really wanted. And I think that's very important when you're in this office is to respond to the community because we've never seen things like that where this could be used as a platform for you all just to tell me what you all want. And because of this, we were able to give these results and you all take that information and you could put public pressure on your elected officials. And so I think what's more real important because we only have 7 auditors is what we're doing on our own, right? A lot of the transparency, the accountability work, the dashboards, that's being done by our own executive office. We're supplementing those budget cuts that we had with us doing the work ourselves. So that's how you do it, public pressure with our data.
Great. Thank you. Over to you, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, this again is a great question. And I go back to the sort of twin powers of the office, which are, in my view, the bully pulpit to highlight issues that exist, to propose solutions, and then ultimately to rally the public to advocate for those reforms, as well as soft power. And again, I think this soft power, the power of persuasion, the power of relationship building, this is critical to effective management. This is something that I think the city has lacked on a broad scale, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I view the controller, to use a kind of cheeky term, I think that the controller is kind of the glue guy of City Hall. It's working behind the scenes to uplift its other city departments. It's the point guard of City Hall, sort of dishing out the rock to allow other people to score, to allow other people to do their job. I'm not interested in doing this job for credit. I'm doing it for results. And so at the end of the day, I think it is fundamentally an approach that you bring to the office, which will allow individuals who are in positions of decision making to use the information that you provide to follow the solutions that you recommend.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, this is our last curated question, then we'll go to the audience. Quite simply, if elected, what would you change compared to the status quo? What would you do the same or differently? How do you want to be the controller? We'll start with Zach.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you've heard quite, expansively tonight about how I feel a controller office under my leadership would be different from the current controllers. I think it really does prioritize a balance between accountability and oversight and collaboration and partnership. As I said, I'm running for controller to ensure that our tax dollars are spent creating an LA that is safe, prosperous, affordable, and inclusive. Now, I haven't talked specifically about some of the major priorities that I would advance in the Office of Controller. I think ensuring that basic city services are provided at the highest quality. This is something we have talked about quite a bit in our streets and sidewalks, but also two others that I would focus on. One would be auditing every dollar spent around homelessness and affordable housing, because you have ULA just passing $1 billion in funds. You have LASA, which has a $900 million budget. You've got 1.2 million from Prop HHH, another billion from Measure A. I mean, that's $4 billion right there. And that doesn't even include the annual allocation. And what have we gotten for that money? And so auditing the vendors that we use in homelessness and affordable housing services would be a huge priority. And then the last of which would be focusing on the regulations and permitting around driving economic growth. I think one example is that it would be my goal to create the Office of Chief Revenue Officer in the Controller's office, to have someone whose sole job it is to understand how we can raise revenue in the city.
Thank you. Kenneth?
Thank you for this question. Since we've been in office, we've been doing so much that has never been done before. We've created so many different reports and dashboards for you all that provides better transparency and accountability on your budget and your finances. As it relates to what we're talking about today, we've been pushing for the capital infrastructure plan, and it's finally getting put into use through the mayor's executive directive. We brought more transparency on operations and metrics with our performance metrics dashboard, our capital projects dashboard, and we even brought in a lot of transparency on the city's liabilities with our liability claims dashboard. And so, we want to continue this work of radical transparency and accountability as your controller, because we can't afford to go back to the way it was before, where there wasn't any of that. You need someone who's going to be in there who can say the things without, being afraid if it will rile up your political officials or your interests. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember you are beholden to the people who voted for you. And so, what we look forward to in this next, this year and in our next term is building continuing our audit of our liability claims. We're actually building a revamped version of the Measure HLA dashboard, thanks to community input. We're also building a ongoing maintenance dashboard, because not only do we want to focus on capital projects, but we want to know what are we repairing. And in addition, we're also analyzing the cost to repair sidewalks, curb ramps, and crosswalks as well. So a lot to do still.
Thank you. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes for audience questions. We have a bunch. I will do 1 minute each. If you don't need the full minute, don't feel the pressure to take it. First question. Police cars in Europe are significantly smaller. They're basically compact hatchbacks. So they're significantly smaller than LAPDs. LAPD's large SUVs must cost more than a compact police car would. What do you think of doing an audit of the budget LAPD spends on the purchase of SUVs and then comparing it to the cost of compact police cars? I'll start with Kenneth.
Yeah, that's a great question. And not necessarily we wouldn't have to do an audit. We can just do a lot of our information requests and analysis, because, like I said, we only have 7 auditors, and these audits could take up to a year. And depending on the department's cooperation, if they want to give us the information, it takes a long time. So we're definitely for that, right? We looked at the helicopter costs. We're also interested in their MECLA vehicle costs. Like you said, they have electric vehicles, and we saw that they weren't even using the electric vehicles, and that actually was on the news. So, but to be honest, I think we have to look at public safety as a whole. If you want to get anything passed for the police, just letting everyone know, because I tell the truth, is you have to get through the police union. And if you really want to get that done, you have to see if they're going to be down with having smaller vehicles. And so, that's really tied to who your political allies and who they're beholden to. So, yeah.
Zach?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can't say I've thought too much prior to this about the size of police vehicles, but I think that that's an interesting point. I think, look, every dollar in the city budget matters. And I think you can find smaller wins that ultimately add up to large amounts of savings. Ultimately, I think a theme of our campaign is more money does not solve the problem. I think we've seen across countless issues that throwing money at a problem is not always the answer. And so if this is ultimately something that we decide to take up as a controller's office, I'd be curious to know what impact that would have. But on its face, it feels like a reasonable question to want to know why certain geographies do it differently than us. And I guess I'll just end by saying that comparing us to other peer cities, both in the States and internationally, is, I think, one very effective way of understanding how well we're doing things relative to other cities.
This person didn't include LAFD in that question, but I will just say that our fire engines are about twice the size of those in Japan and Europe. The city is testing an electric fire engine about half the size from Sweden right now. But it's relevant to Streets for All's work because the fire department is often a hindrance to safer streets because they need so much space to maneuver their apparatus. And so if you had a smaller fire truck, you could potentially have easier road safety improvements. All right. This question happens to be about the fire department. Second question from Gustavo. The fire department is seeking to include a ballot measure that would increase sales tax to raise revenue for their budget. Could both candidates share their thoughts on the measure? What trade-offs do you anticipate if said sales tax does happen? We'll start with Zach.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Gustavo, for the question. And I know that they're trying to get this initiative on the ballot. I mean, look, I think it's clear after a year of uh, the disasters in Altadena and the Palisades how our fire department needs to be supported. Finding insurance for your homes in this city has become nearly impossible because of the fire risk. But at the end of the day, I think you also have to balance that against the affordability crisis in which we find ourselves. Folks are feeling pinched, and another half-cent sales tax just adds to that burden. And so, look, I don't believe there are any black and white answers in public policy making. There's only trade-offs, and certainly there are several of them involved in this initiative.
Thank you. Kenneth?
You know, the fire department, we were actually the ones who showed that the fire department got their budget cut when this all happened, because what you saw was that a lot of officials were saying that, nothing changed. It was hidden in a separate account, and we were the ones who actually were able to break down where that money went. And so, the fire department, definitely there are areas where they are underfunded and they don't have the firefighters to do that. I think that a sales tax, that is one area that people are trying to raise revenue, and which was actually brought up the other day to fund all the city. And I think, if we just keep relying on sales tax, which are regressive, and we keep increasing them, it could definitely, and it does impact our lowest, income folks too. So for this one, I could see the half-cent sales tax for the fire department helping them as well, because the city is not budgeting enough for them, right? And so that's something that we definitely are looking into.
Okay. We'll try to get through two. If you don't need the full minute, please don't take it. In your opinion, are there any agencies or departments besides LAPD and FD where you would support a smaller budget? We'll start with Kenneth.
I mean, LAPD definitely. I mean, they have a $3.4 billion budget. Um, we go past it. Like, it's not even, it's ridiculous. The city will set up a budget and every department has to abide by it. And for them, they could just go over, right? And a lot of it is we've been pointing out that there are payments that didn't even need to be made. For example, we're the ones who called out the city for paying at least over $80 million in excess pension contributions, right? That's dollars that could have been spent for other departments, for transportation, for public works, things like that, right? And in addition, you also have the fact that you have officers, sworn officers, doing the duties that are non-patrol. And these are the things that we need to look at, right? Is how can we best provide public safety that doesn't always require someone with a gun and end up paying massive liability claims, almost $400 million in the last 6 years. So definitely that's some of the things that we've been pushing and we've been looking at here in our office.
Zach?
Yeah, well, look, I think that departments that are heavy users of consultants, as we discussed in a prior question, I think would be one area where we could see better coordination and partnership and therefore reduce costs. I would also highlight the city treasury. The city treasury at any given time is $16 billion. But if you look through all of the different line items within the city treasury, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of idle or unused funds. They may have been earmarked or allocated for specific uses at one time, but have just sat there, not getting put to work. Some in as long as 3, 4, 5 years have just been accumulating. And so to be able to unlock those funds, which is just a kind of crazy way to manage. You would never manage your personal budget like that, and it's unclear why you would manage the city budget that way. But I think that that's another area that you could see going in and unlocking funds for important services across the city.
We're basically out of time. I did want to quickly ask, because it's just on my mind, how close is the city to being insolvent? Like, are we years away? Are we closer than that? How bad is it, um, in your opinion? And we'll start with Zach.
Yeah, I mean, look, it seems bad. I mean, from an outsider's perspective looking in, it seems very bad. I don't know if I can quantify precisely how far away we are, Michael. That's obviously something that we'd love to dig into further. But it's clear that the city has a bad habit of kicking the can down the road and leaving for tomorrow problems that could be solved today. And so at the heart of our campaign is trying to face those hard truths, not shying away from them, but also not wilting from them either, not caving in the face of difficulty, but rallying together, working collaboratively and in partnership with city stakeholders to forestall or avoid something more catastrophic like you are describing.
Kenneth?
It's bad, y'all. We're in our third budget deficit year in a row. We've got our credit rating agencies putting us on negative watch lists. We've dipped below our 5% reserves level, which we try to be at. We are literally cutting every department's budget and risking layoffs and forcing people into furlough days. And these are all preventable. These are all things that we've cited since we took office because of the way the city manages finances. I like to joke that this is the worst run company because I come from the private sector. I did this work and I bring that knowledge here. And now you sort of see it with city council members and the mayor meeting with me in our third year now because they see how bad it is and because of the hard truths that we've been putting out because you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. And that's why my office is helping this year on the budget. And I think that's why it's really important that we have someone who has financial experience and who's unequivocally for the people and could say those hard truths about the city's finances and the city's budget.
Okay, thank you. We are going to go to closing statements, and we're going to start with Kenneth whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Streets for All for this. You guys have all been doing amazing work. We've been supporting, the whole goal of making an LA that's better than it was before, right? And especially in the context of mobility. I'm one who actually uses my bike to go around town. And we need someone who's in this office to keep saying the hard but necessary truth about our city. And that's something that you could always get from me, no matter what, even if it costs me my relationship with another political official, which I do face all the time. But it's the truth that you all need to know as taxpayers. I'm committed to this work. Um, as a city's accountant and auditor, I take this duty very, very seriously. And I think what we've done in the last 3 years and just the amount of support that we've been getting, whether it's in the public or it's the fact that the Charter Reform Commission or it's the mayor or it's the city council, they're finally coming around to what we've been saying and doing now really shows just how effective that we've been. I will always remain independent to you all. I have a broad base of support from everywhere around the entire city. I will always refuse corporate and special interest money and I will always work for you all. I think for my second term, I really want to focus on fighting for structural reforms, whether it's our budget and finances, and pretty much, making sure that the city can give better delivery of services and build a safe and, you know, a livable city that we all could thrive in. And so I'm very thankful. A lot of the things that Zach mentioned, we put out the idle funds report, and we're happy to continue doing this work for you all. So thank you.
Thank you. Zach, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Streets for All, for hosting this forum. Thank you, Kenneth, for participating. It's great to have a conversation about issues that matter really deeply to all Angelinos. Look, it's clear that the city is craving change, but nothing changes if nothing changes, and doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. And so I'm running for controller to bring change to City Hall. I'm running to ensure that our tax dollars are spent making LA safe, prosperous, affordable, and inclusive. And I'm running to make government work better for the people of LA, restoring hope that our elected leaders working in community with residents can not only deliver basic services, but tackle some of our biggest challenges. I'm a former Algebra 1 teacher, as I mentioned, and I've spent the last decade as an accounting and finance executive managing large economic development projects here in LA. I believe these experiences and my vision for the office and my approach to the office position me to execute the duties of controller on behalf of the people of LA. It would be an honor to serve as your next controller, to work in partnership with organizations and citizen leaders like those here in Streets for All. And thank you again very much for hosting this forum and for having me participate in it.
Thank you both. I want to say that it's not easy to be on your feet for an hour fielding questions and sticking to time, and you did it very well. So thank you both for participating, and thanks to the audience. I did want to give a nod to our next. Well, this should have been a debate, but the incumbent doesn't wish to attend, so it became a discussion. So we'll have a CD11 mobility discussion, and that will be on this coming Monday at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. We'll have a conversation with Faisal Malik, who's running for Council District 11. That's it for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much. See you later. Good night.